Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
Good morning. Welcome to another edition of Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Last time we got together, we were reading and discussing this very informative book entitled The Global Vatican by former U.S. Ambassador Francis Rooney, former U.S. Ambassador to the Roman Catholic Church, or rather the Vatican City. They call it the Holy See. The Bible calls it the mystery of iniquity. We were reading on page 5 in the first chapter of this book. By the way, the title of this chapter is The Greatest of Evils to be Feared. What was the greatest of evils to be feared during the colonial period of our country? Roman Catholicism. They called it popery, that is, pope worship. And I know it to be Antichrist worship. It is not Christianity. Anyone who catches themselves referring to Roman Catholicism as Christianity needs to be corrected. Roman Catholicism is the antithesis to Christianity. Christianity has Christ, and Christ only as its king. Christianity has the Bible and the Bible only for its authority. That is God's written word to man. Roman Catholicism is a very poor counterfeit. First of all, it regards the Pope as the representative, or rather God, hidden under a veil of flesh. The papacy in true Roman Catholicism is Pope worship. And the Pope, the papacy, all throughout history, at the time of the writing of this book, for nearly 2 millennia, has persecuted the Church of Jesus Christ. Inquisitions, tortures, forced conversions to Roman Catholicism, persecution on a global scale. The Roman Catholic Church regards Protestantism as those who protest the Antichrist, protest the papacy and his church. The Roman Catholic Church regards them as heretics. And according to the Third and Fourth Lateran Council, it's no crime to kill a heretic. As a matter of fact, it's a meritorious work. Roman Catholics of history, according to the Roman Catholic Church, gain unto themselves more and more and more grace the more Protestants and heretics they kill, whether they be Protestants or Jews or anyone else that the papacy calls a heretic. And literally Europe was drenched with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And from a Protestant point of view, a truly Protestant point of view, a point of view that is virtually lost today, because Protestants don't know their Protestant history, regard the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church as a Christian denomination, for crying out loud. And that's why we're losing our rights in this country. That's why our government seems to serve someone other than its people. What we're doing right now before our very eyes is returning to the old world order. And they call it new, and that confuses people. There's nothing new about it. It's only renewed since the Protestant Reformation set the record straight. The papacy is the Antichrist. The Roman Catholic Church is the synagogue of Satan. It is the counterfeit of Christ. It is the counterfeit of his church, and never should it be referred to as Christianity. You can't get more dogmatic than that. To call Roman Catholicism Christianity is to call dark light. The greatest evils to be feared was Roman Catholicism during the colonial period. During the colonial period, the Protestants were truly Protestant. They protested the Antichrist. They feared the Antichrist. Their heritage had suffered for over a millennium at the hand of the papacy and all the civil governments of Europe that ruled at his behest. All the blood of the martyrs of Jesus were shed by the papacy and the kings of Europe over which he ruled. And the Protestants of the colonies never wanted the papacy to get a foothold in the United States of America. They feared any American Roman Catholic Church. No matter how much they professed to want love and amity with Protestants, it was never to be. You can't mix oil and water, and a leopard doesn't change its spots. For this Maryland Roman Catholic colony to profess religious liberty runs contrary to the whole history of the papacy and the whole history of the Roman Catholic Church. From the papacy's point of view, this Maryland colony, which was seeking, as it were, peace and amity with Protestants, is an aberration of the Roman Catholic Church, completely contrary to all of its history. Now, retreating one paragraph where we concluded last time, the author says initially Maryland was intended to be the exception to the rule. Okay, the exception being that religious liberty was promoted and became the byword of the Maryland colony. Imagine a Roman Catholic colony proclaiming as its foundation religious liberty when it had never existed in all of Roman Catholicism. But in the rest of the colonies, which were overwhelmingly Protestant, there were laws and ordinances against Roman Catholicism. It could not be openly practiced. No open practice of Roman Catholicism at all. To get caught practicing the Mass in public would have probably gotten you killed. And, of course, Rome would like to suggest that it's the Protestants who detest religious liberty. I will award religious liberty and freedom of conscience to all of those who will reward me with the same. But it has never been in the history of the Roman Catholic Church to allow true religious liberty. Allow me to be Protestant and to reject that church and reject its authority over me through the civil power. I have a right to protest the Roman Catholic Church. I have a right to protest every time a Jesuit priest has a new civil law passed in Congress and imposed upon me, making me comply with Roman Catholic canon law when Christ gave me liberty. So they outlawed Roman Catholicism in all the other colonies, and they just patiently not so patiently tolerated Roman Catholicism in the Maryland colony. Again, he says, initially, Maryland was intended to be the exception to the rule. The colony was founded by a Catholic Englishman, Cecil Calvert, better known as the Second Lord Baltimore. Calvert's father, George, the First Lord Baltimore, charter by King Charles I in 1632 to form a settlement along the Potomac River. While never conceived as an exclusively Catholic enclave, Maryland was meant to be a place where Catholics might enjoy, quote, mutual love and amity, unquote, with Protestants, quote, free from persecution on account of their religion, unquote. George Calvert died shortly after receiving the charter, and it was left to Cecil to organize the settlement, which he did in 1634, when the Ark and the Dove landed in Maryland's Chesapeake Bay, carrying Jesuit missionaries along with Catholics and Protestant settlers. All right, this was a shipment, 2 little ships plus a little supply ship, loaded with Protestants and Catholics and Jesuit priests, all seeming to desire religious liberty and the religious conflicts that dominated the history of England. Protestants persecuting Catholics, Catholics persecuting Protestants, Jesuits managing the conflicts constantly and inciting the unrest, the religious unrest. And I have read this book entitled, and the information that the author is giving us now comes directly from a book entitled The Ark and the Dove by J. Moss Ives, a book which we have read right here on Inquisition Update. Thoroughly examined that book, commented on it. You can look it up in the First Amendment Radio archives for Inquisition Update and read that book for yourself, or listen to me read it and discuss it. The ships were loaded with supplies, Jesuit priests, Catholics, and Protestants, all headed for the colonies, seeking religious liberty. Now, I don't doubt for a minute that there were many of the Roman Catholics on that ship that really, truly wanted religious freedom. They were sick and tired of the constant battle between the Protestants and the Catholics in England. They had the attitude of live and let live, okay? God knows his own. Let us each worship according to our own faiths, and God will find out who's true and who is false. But complicating matters for both sides were the Jesuits that were on that ship. And a Jesuit swears an oath, an extreme oath of induction that sets his life's mission to overthrow Protestantism and to elevate the papacy to global spiritual and temporal authority. That's your New World Order. It's been on the books in the Roman Catholic Church forever. It's the very foundation of the Roman Catholic Church that as the replacement of the Son of God on earth, the Pope has the right, the divine right, to rule the world, both in spiritual things and temporal things. And that is the absolute bottom line dictation for the Jesuits. That is their order. And if they cease to seek the total dictatorial reign of the Pope over the globe, they cease to be Jesuits. So the cancer, if there ever were to be religious liberty in the colonies, the Jesuits were there to see to that it was only a temporary condition until such time as the Roman Catholic Church, the American Roman Catholic Church, unique in all the world, seeking religious liberty, until such time as that church could gain in strength and power and control and literally hand over this country to the Pope on a silver platter. That day has arrived in the estimation of Inquisition Update. So we're reading the history of the account of the very beginnings of Roman Catholicism in this country. In a number of colonies that were already well established to be Protestant and had a watchful eye to the growth of Roman Catholicism in this country, the greatest evil to be feared in this new country. Roman Catholicism, and especially Jesuit-controlled Roman Catholicism, which is American Roman Catholicism. He continues, he says, the spirit of amity held for a number of years. In 1649, the Maryland Assembly, that is the governing body of the Maryland colony, took a historic step ensuring the right of Catholics and Protestants to practice their respective religions. Maryland's quote-unquote Toleration Act, limited as it was, since no allowance was made for Jews or other non-Christian faiths, is widely considered a template for the establishment of the free exercise clauses of the First Amendment, and would be adopted by the United States 140 years later. So here this Roman Catholic author is suggesting indirectly that the United States government and the First Amendment to the Constitution are really owed to the Roman Catholic Church, to the Maryland colony, to the Toleration Act, religious liberty. That's what Roman Catholicism is claiming. Roman Catholicism would have you, me, and everybody else in this country understand that it was they who gave us religious liberty. That Roman Catholics gave us religious liberty in the Maryland colony under the Toleration Act. That became a cornerstone of the American government. That's what Roman Catholicism would have you believe, that it was they who gave it. Now, what happens if the United States accepts the fact that we got our religious liberty from the Roman Catholic Church? Well, what Rome giveth, Rome can take away. You see where I'm going with this? If the United States, the American people, accredit the Roman Catholic Church for establishing religious liberty in this country, then it is their creation. And if they own it, they control it, they can take it away. It's just like when you sign up to pay your taxes. If you don't sign up, you don't pay taxes. If you do, they control you. They own your property at that point. You know? You let the whore into your bed, she owns the whole house. Roman Catholicism suggests that religious liberty is credited to the Roman Catholic Church when it runs contrary to its entire history except for the Roman Catholic colony of Maryland. And they're claiming credit for your and my right to worship God according to our consciences. And I'm telling you today, they are taking that right away. If they gave it, they can take it away. That is the first rule of Roman Catholicism. Whatever Rome creates, Rome owns. And she can do with as she pleases. All rights, according to Roman Catholic canon law, come from God. And God's representative on the earth is the Pope. And whatever the Pope gives, the Pope can take away. And that's exactly what we're seeing. If we credit, listen carefully, if we credit Rome for giving us religious liberty, then it is her domain to do with as she pleases. She gives it, and she has for so far, but she's taking it away now. Are you losing your religious liberty? You see, I can't speak freely on amateur radio about these things because the amateur radio and the Federal Communications Commission and the Amateur Radio Relay League just simply won't tolerate it. They oversee the jamming of my transmissions. It's becoming a violation of religious liberty to criticize the Roman Catholic Church and recount its history and even its history in the United States of America. Now, if I'm not free in a Protestant land to identify to my listeners who the Antichrist is and prove it with copious proofs, do I have religious liberty? If Protestantism, as it's commonly called, is not allowed to protest, is that religious liberty? I demand my religious liberty. I demand the same liberty that every Protestant has enjoyed all of his life, even though it cost him his life. To speak out against the Pope, the papacy, the Antichrist, the man of sin, the son of perdition, during the old world order, it cost you your life. And that's the way it's going to be in this new world order. The First Amendment, according to this author, was adopted by the United States government 140 years later. That means it originated from the Roman Catholic Maryland colony. So according to this author, you can attribute your religious liberty to the Roman Catholic Church. And they're going to take it away. They are taking it away. Okay, I beat that horse to death. It says, but Maryland did not turn out to be a happy refuge for Catholics. 5 years after its passage, that is the Toleration Act, the Toleration Act was tossed out in a Protestant coup within the colony. You know, Roman Catholicism, the Maryland colony, the religious liberty that they pronounce, it's the greatest evil to be feared in the colonies, and the Protestants overthrew it. We know what your religious liberty is all about. It's liberty for Catholics to practice, to gain control, just like they did in Europe. That's what you intend to do here. You brought the Jesuits with you when you came across the ship. That means you do not have religious liberty as the basis for your existence. And they feared the Jesuits. They feared the Roman Catholics who were taught by the Jesuits, because they knew inevitably what their goal would be. And he says Catholics soon regained control and reestablished the law of religious liberty. The Catholics reinstated in their colony after it was overthrown by the Protestants. And it says, but by 1692, after the Glorious Revolution in England, and then in the parentheses when he says the Catholic King James I was replaced by Protestant William of Orange. Remember, the Protestants and the Catholics were always at each other's throats in England. And England became Protestant for a time under William of Orange. It says they had lost power again. So when England became Protestant, the colonies followed suit and overthrew the so-called religious liberty propounded by the Maryland colony. Okay, Roman Catholicism was suppressed in this country. Now, Roman Catholics and ecumenical evangeli-belly Protestants in name only will tell you that this was a dark day in American history. That Catholics weren't allowed to be Catholic. That they were not eligible for government. They weren't allowed to vote. But this is a democratic society. Why, we can't have the Catholics deprived of their right to vote. That's completely devoid of any historical understanding of Roman Catholicism. And I do not count it abuse to deny a church, to deny members of a church whose foundation is the Antichrist of the Bible and papal tyranny, and a history that is dripping with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, and it tyrannized all of Europe for over a millennia. The Protestants full well knew the fear of the Pope. They full well understood the role of the Jesuits. They wrote books about it. Many books about it. Libraries of books have been written about the history of the Jesuits, many of which we've read right here on Inquisition Update. The fear, the natural fear for the Roman Catholic Church in America in the colonial period was palpable, and it was righteous. Catholics were not allowed to practice their cult. Catholics were not allowed to vote. Catholics were not allowed to be equals with Protestants on legitimate religious grounds, just as legitimate as Christ is against Antichrist. And no Protestant should apologize for depriving Roman Catholics of their ability to tyrannize Protestants by taking over the government and taking away from this phony religious liberty that they presume to imply apply the Maryland colony called the Toleration Act. Get your history straight. We'll be back right after this.
You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com worldwide. Freedom is never free. We need your support today at FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased. It has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, welcome back to the second half of Inquisition Update on First Amendment Radio. If you'd like to contact me, please do so by email. My email address is tom@seawaves.us. That's tom@seawaves.us. I'll be glad to answer all email that require an answer. We're at the bottom of the page, the second paragraph in the bottom of the page 5 in the book. It says, but Maryland did not turn out to be a happy refuge for Catholics. 5 years after its passage, the Toleration Act was tossed out in a Protestant coup within the colony. Catholics soon regained control and reinstated the law, but by 1692, after the Glorious Revolution in England, when the Catholic King James I was replaced by the Protestant William of Orange, they had lost power again. Protestant orthodoxy became the law of the land. Talk of religious toleration did not resume for another 80 years. So the Catholics were suppressed after the Glorious Revolution. The Maryland Catholics were suppressed because they were the greatest of evils to be feared in the Protestant mind. The overwhelmingly Protestant colonies feared the Catholics, and especially the Jesuits. The persecution of Catholics varied in degree during these years, but it was persistent. anti-popery laws, that is, anti-popery, you may never have heard that term before, but it was a popular term in colonial period. Anti-popery laws restricted Catholics' rights to celebrate Mass publicly and to baptize their children, as well as their rights to vote and hold public office, and generally dismissed Catholics as misguided and possibly seditious aliens whose faith precluded full citizenship. Why were they denied citizenship in the Protestant colonies? Because every Protestant knows that a Roman Catholic is bound by Roman Catholic canon law to have his first loyalty to the Pope, a foreign potentate in Italy, in Rome, Italy, and that its history was the persecution of the Protestant Church and a history of denial of freedom of religion to God's people. So Catholics, you might live next door to a Catholic in the Maryland colony. Even though you love the man and his family, might have shared coffee over the fence every morning, might have traded together, you knew deep down in your heart, so long as he was a Catholic, he could not be a full citizen of the United States, of the colonial period. He could not be a full citizen because his first citizenship belongs to Rome. You know, you can't trust somebody with a dual citizenship, just like you can't trust a man who professes Christ but serves Antichrist. You can't serve two masters. Common sense, anything with two heads is a monster. These Protestants had it right. Who could fully trust citizenship, full citizenship, to a Roman Catholic who openly had to acknowledge the papacy as his King of Kings and Lord of Lords? It's foolishness to suggest that a Roman Catholic could be a full citizen of this country. To be loyal to the United States, yet principally loyal to Rome? That was the knowledge of the colonies. It's totally lost today. And I'm sure many of my listeners are saying, well, you're telling me that Roman Catholics' first loyalty is to Rome? According to Roman Catholic canon law, it is. According to the quote-unquote Holy See, it is. According to the quote-unquote Pope, it is. Now, there are good Catholics and bad Catholics. Bad Catholics reject the authority of the papacy. They pay it homage every time they go to the Roman Catholic Church and participate in the Mass and all the other gobbledygook. But secretly, they loathe the papacy. They loathe the Vatican bank scandals. They loathe the assassination of popes. They loathe the pedophile priest pandemic. But they love Christ. They love Christianity. Okay? I have a suggestion for Catholics that love Christ. All you have to do is separate Christ from Antichrist, and you're good to go. It's not that hard. Of course, your family's going to make it difficult for you. Your priest is going to make it difficult for you, and if they can elicit the civil government to persecute you. Lord knows there'll be plenty of persecution in the church for you, but there's nothing like liberty. There's nothing like Christ. Trust me, there is Christianity after Roman Catholicism. I have many friends who attest of the liberty that they've received after they've left the Roman Catholic Church. You know, some of my greatest friends are liberated Roman Catholics who have finally seen the light of that church. And many of them attest that it's because of my ministry that they've seen the light and come out of the Roman Catholic Church. Those people love me because they love Christ, and they love the liberty whereby Christ hath made us free from the church of tyranny. But colonists Protestant colonists at best could only regard Roman Catholics as misguided, but worse, possibly seditious aliens whose faith precluded full citizenship. If they were Roman Catholics, they were precluded from be given full citizenship in this colony, and that's the way it should be today. No Roman Catholic whose first loyalty is to the papacy should be awarded citizenship in this country because of that dual loyalty. Can they do what's best for this country if their faith requires them to do what's best for their Pope, which the Bible and history confirm is none other than the Antichrist of the Bible? This is common sense we're talking about. This isn't religious persecution for the sake of religious persecution. This is the facts of life. It says, having been tempered by years of persecution, Maryland Catholics learned to accommodate their faith to reality. You know what he just told you? Roman Catholics learned to compromise their faith to the reality that the colonies were overwhelmingly Protestant, and they didn't have a ghost chance of bringing popery to this country when they were so overwhelmed by Protestants. They could not impose religious persecution against Protestants in this country until they gained control. And that would take hundreds of years for Roman Catholicism to practice and to prosper and to gain the trust of Protestants and then occupy the highest places in the government. And once they have achieved the majority status, and that took place at Vatican Council II, when the Protestants literally renounced their Protestantism, the whole country became Catholic. From Rome's point of view, from the Roman Catholic hierarchy in this country, the bishops and the priests and the cardinals, from their point of view, if the Protestants have renounced their Protestantism, there is no more Protestantism. That means this is a Catholic country and has been from the beginning, and we're going to do whatever the hell we want to do. We have a political mandate now. Even those who still call themselves Protestants are not protesting us anymore. They're on our side. They may call themselves Baptists, they may call themselves Lutherans, Episcopalians, whatever. They come under the authority of the papacy. The only claim to liberty from papal authority came during the Protestant Reformation. When they renounced that at Vatican Council II, they became subjects of Rome. And now we have a political mandate. When we priests of the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuits, the cardinals, the bishops, the college, the council of bishops, when we decide something, it becomes an overwhelming lobby in Washington, D.C., a virtual mandate, because they now not only represent the card-carrying Catholics that sit in the pews every Sunday morning and take the Mass, they represent the repentant Protestants. You see what this is? You know, I dare say you've never heard this before in your life. That's the position that the Roman Catholic Church has taken in America. That's why you see unabashed priests wearing their black frocks running all over Washington, D.C. Why? Because in their heart of hearts, they own it. They believe they established it in the first place. They believe our Constitution and Bill of Rights was their baby. They believe the Protestants have said, sorry, we were wrong. We want to come home to mama. Now they own the chicken house. They own everything. And the politicians have to respond. When the Roman Catholic Church represents the majority, and no one would deny that the majority religion in this country is quote unquote Christianity, and that the Roman Catholic Church represents now, after Vatican Council II, it represents Christianity. Why, they just walk in with an automatic majority. They are a walking lobby. You can't fight Rome now. in Washington. That's a political mandate. You know what it is? It's not democracy anymore. Sure, it still exists under the guise of democracy, but it's a rout. That makes it a dictatorship. You see, as long as there's a choice, you can maybe legitimately call it democracy so long as the Pope isn't picking all the candidates. And during the colonial period, it wasn't the Pope picking all the candidates. It was Protestants picking all the candidates. And they were non-Roman Catholics. Catholics couldn't serve in government. It's the opposite of that today. The Pope picks the candidates for the highest offices, president and the cabinet. Okay? That's why Ronald Reagan on down have always had Catholic cabinets. Rome's got control of Washington, D.C., lock, stock, and barrel. There's no protest in Washington, D.C. And if you've got the Knights of Columbus in your local neighborhood, and you've got the Freemasons politically active serving the Jesuits, all the candidates in your local elections are either Roman Catholic or they are ecumenical Vatican Council II capitulators to Rome. And they're going to follow the plan, knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or unwittingly. The pressure is overwhelming. You can't fight the majority Catholic vote. You see what this is? That greatest of evils to be feared during the colonial period now has the overwhelming majority in government in the United States of America, post-Vatican Council II. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for Protestants in this country. In the colonial period, they were so diligent not to allow Roman Catholics to dictate their lives. Barely left them exist. Today is exactly the opposite. Who's going to be persecuted now? Well, all you have to do is look back at the old world order to find out. Because the new world order is simply the old world order restored. And they couldn't have done it without Protestant help. They couldn't have done it without Vatican Council II. They couldn't have done it without futurism that virtually destroys Protestantism and puts the onus of Antichrist on a figure in history that hasn't arrived yet on the world scene, is not an influence in the world today, and probably will never be seen by a so-called Protestant who believes, erroneously as ever, that they're going to be raptured out before the quote-unquote 7 years of Great Tribulation. How successful Protestantism has been destroyed. And who authored futurism? Jesuit priest Francisco Ribera. Leave it to the Jesuits. They know how to destroy their enemies. They destroy their enemies from within. They destroyed Protestantism from behind the Protestant pulpits and from behind the lecterns at the Protestant seminaries in this country. Overwhelming delusion is Protestantism today. Overwhelming capitulation to Antichrist. That's Protestantism today. The greatest of evils to be feared during the colonial period is now the majority rule. The Jesuits know how to get their enemies to fight on their side. And that's how they did it, futurism. Trust me, the colonial period was a much brighter day for America than it is today. The persecution of Catholics varied in degrees during these years, but it was persistent. Anti-popery laws restricted Catholics' rights to celebrate Mass publicly and to baptize their children, as well as their rights to vote or hold a political office. Maryland did not turn out to be a happy refuge for Catholics. 5 years after its passage, the Toleration Act was tossed out in a Protestant coup within the colony. Catholics soon regained control and reinstated the law, but by 1692, after the Glorious Revolution in England, when Roman Catholic King James I was replaced by Protestant William of Orange, they had lost power again. Protestant orthodoxy became the law of the land. And what is Protestant orthodoxy? Protestant orthodoxy says the papacy is the man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, the little horn of Daniel. Babylon, mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth is the Roman Catholic Church. That's what Protestant orthodoxy is. Protestant orthodoxy became the law of the land. Talk of religious toleration did not resume for another 80 years. The persecution of Catholics varied in degree during these years, but it was persistent. Anti-popery laws restricted Catholics' rights to celebrate Mass publicly and to baptize their children, as well as their rights to vote and hold office, and generally dismissed Catholics as misguided and possibly seditious aliens whose faith precluded full citizenship. Having been tempered by years of persecution, Maryland Catholics learned to accommodate their faith to reality. Compromise. Put on a big smile when the Protestants come around. We love you, Protestants, right? We want you to have religious liberty. Never mind what history teaches you. We want you to have religious liberty because we want religious liberty because you overwhelmingly outnumber us. And we just have to accommodate our faith to Protestant reality. But don't turn your back on us. We've got Jesuits helping us. And eventually, we'll overthrow your own house. And that's what they've done. Some Roman Catholics prospered financially in spite of such indignities as a double tax on their land enacted in 1756. The Carroll family managed to become one of the largest and wealthiest landholders in all the colonies. You have to ask yourself, where did the Carroll family get all their money? Well, first of all, remember, the Carroll family back in Ireland, and even before that back on the mainland, were high-priced, paid mercenaries. And the papacy found out that they were prolific in war and set them about to conquer Ireland for the Pope. And the Pope pays handsomely when you advance his kingdom. Okay? So the Carrolls naturally have wealth that they earned through being proxy warriors for the Pope. A job that the Pope wanted them to accomplish here in the colonies, right? So where do you suppose John, Charles, and Daniel got their money and all their land? From the papacy. Now you know why John and Charles Carroll of Carrollton went to Europe for their education. They were literally plotting the Revolutionary War to separate the colonies from Protestant Great Britain. Remember the Glorious Revolution? They had to overthrow the Protestant hold on the colonies, and they had to promote religious liberty so Roman Catholicism could survive. And that was going to cost a revolutionary war. It was going to cost a lot of money. And only the papacy has that kind of money. Okay? Carrolls have plenty of their own money. Trust me, they got it from the Pope. They won it. They earned it from the Pope, fighting crusades against the heathen in Ireland to make Ireland Catholic. That's why it's majority Catholic today. Successful warriors of the Pope, hundreds of years of service to the papacy. Although they weren't Catholic, they were simply just doing their jobs, making big money, fighting wars. Okay? The Carrolls became one of the largest and wealthiest landholders in all the colonies. Rich or poor, Catholics worshiped quietly in their homes or in small private chapels, a function both of their illicitness of the public mass and the scarcity of churches. Okay? They couldn't even build churches. Most of their priests were itinerant missionaries. That is, they moved from place to place. They didn't have a church to set, they lived from house to house. They were itinerant. They moved around. Most of their priests were itinerant missionaries who traveled great distances through the countryside, showing up in towns between long intervals to perform baptisms, weddings, burials, and other Roman Catholic rites. Quote, "You must not imagine that your chapels look as ours do," one Jesuit missionary wrote home in England in 1764. Quote, "They are in great forests, some miles from any house of hospitality. Swamps, runs, miry holes, lost in the night, as yet and ever will in this country attend us," unquote. According to this Jesuit, they would never look like the big cathedrals in Europe. But today, you can't take a glance in any direction in Washington, D.C. without seeing the twin spires of Roman Catholic cathedrals everywhere you look. The hundreds of millions of dollars that they have spent to erect Roman Catholic cathedrals in Washington would stagger you. Unbelievable. The beginnings of the Roman Catholic Church in America to what it is today. He continues, he says, "Given these obstacles, it's a good bet that the man who later became the first bishop of the United States, the first Roman Catholic bishop of the United States, seldom met a priest as a young boy." Roman Catholicism was suppressed during the colonies, but up rose one chosen boy, John Carroll, the Jesuit priest. And that began the end of religious liberty in this country. That began the beginning of the New World Order in the colonies. It started small, it ends on a grand scale, and very few even recognize it. We'll continue to point out the New World Order to you. The reading and discussion of this book, The Global Vatican, by former U.S. Ambassador Francis Rooney, when we continue tomorrow on Inquisition Update. Thanks for listening.
The views expressed by Dr. Joel Wallach and others on the following live paid program represent opinions of the participants only and do not necessarily represent those of the ZBS Radio Network's staff, management, advertisers, or affiliates. If something is said which you find offensive or with which you disagree, the ZBS Radio Network urges you to call the program in order to help us balance comment. This program is meant to present nutritional information only and is in no way meant to replace.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Officials are now saying between 24 and 28 homes were burned in a fast-moving fire in central Washington state. The fire that has burned more than 4 square miles since Sunday afternoon has calmed down since a Monday morning rain shower. Correspondent Nick Geranius reports the fire spread out of control and destroyed homes.
There were 24 homes destroyed. The fire covers about 4 square miles, and most of the destroyed homes were in an upscale neighborhood on the north side of town. It's predicted to be a very active fire season here because the state is so dry. Most of the winter snowpack melted very, very early. There hasn't been a lot of rain, so the forests and the grasslands are dry as tinder, and just about anything will start.
The White House says nuclear talks with Iran are headed for overtime. Mark Smith reports.
Press Secretary Josh Earnest says it's a sign major roadblocks to a final deal remain.
This is not surprising or uncommon.
Hence, top diplomats are making plans to stay in Vienna for a few days more. Yet Iran's flew home for consultations after a top general said no to inspections of military sites. Can Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif really be trusted to make a deal?
That's an entirely legitimate question.
But Ernest says not trusting is the key to success.
The only way that the president will sign an agreement is if Iran does commit to cooperate with the most intrusive set of inspections that have ever been imposed on a country's nuclear program.
Mark Smith at the White House.
The Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-gender marriage is still the topic of conversation throughout the country.